And now, the general weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. Thanks for joining for our general weather segment for today. Starting off, we'll take a quick look at our fire weather. After a really dry and hot week of weather, we are starting to see some rain return, especially along the west coast today and spreading more into the interior for tomorrow. So we do expect that to dampen a lot of the fuels. In the eastern interior, we do expect a lot of the heavy rain to not make it really far to the east, so there will still be some very burnable materials in the Yukon Flats and along the Alcan border. And then looking ahead to next week, we do expect the wet pattern to continue, bringing in more week. That is going to really shut off the fire season for most locations, with the exception again of the Yukon Flats area, as well as the far eastern interior. Taking a look at our fire map, we can see out over the Yukon Flats area. We still have very high fire danger expected for tomorrow. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, the main focus is going to be this front pushing into the west coast of the state. We can see a lot of cloud cover moving up to the north, really starting to spread a lot of rain to areas in southwest Alaska as well, a bit farther up the coastline towards the Norton Sound area. So looking ahead, we can see this front slowly moving through the state, bringing in a lot of rain to the west coast of the state, starting to spread some of that farther to the east. Now, a lot of the activity out farther to the east is going to be some lingering thunderstorms with some instability out over the area, not as widespread of rain as what we are seeing along the west coast right now. As we move a little bit further south, I do want to point out that we do have two flood advisories out. One is for the Kennecott River, the other one is for the Chilkat River. We do expect both of those to start to taper off on Saturday. Meanwhile, down in the Panhandle area, some drier areas farther to the south, a little pocket of drier air out over the eastern portion of the Gulf of Alaska, but we are still seeing some rain, especially in the more farther north locations. We have another low forming near Kodiak Island, bringing in some rain for Kodiak, as well as the western portions of the Gulf of Alaska and up to the Kenai Peninsula. Then out over the Bering Sea, we have a low moving through the area by the Pribilof Islands, bringing some rain to the central and eastern portions of the Bering, and some southerly flow bringing up some rain for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. As we move into tonight, we have a system approaching from the west, bringing in some more rain to the western Aleutian Islands, a low forming out by the eastern Aleutian Islands, helping to continue rain for much of the eastern Aleutians, as well as out by the Alaska Peninsula. As we look out over the mainland part of the state, we can see our front slowly pushing to the east, bringing the more moderate precipitation farther east with it, but still bringing in some heavier amounts to the west coast of the state. Our other low pushing into the Gulf now is going to start to bring rain widespread throughout the Gulf waters, as well as all along the North Gulf Coast and down through all of the Panhandle. Then moving into Friday, the front with that system still bringing in rain, particularly to the northern portions of the Panhandle, starting to get a little bit drier air out in the southern portions. You can see this little bit of ridging that's hanging on there for the southern portion of the Panhandle. Out over the mainland part of the state, we have our front continuing to push through, bringing some of that more moderate rain into the western portions of the interior, trying to get into the central locations as well, but rain up through the Brooks Range and up along the Arctic coast as well. Might even be cold enough up there by the Ukqiagvik area to see a mix of rain and snow. Out along the west coast, seeing westerly flow, bringing in some rain off of the Bering Sea. And then our other system down by the Aleutians, continuing to bring rain throughout the Aleutian Islands and up into the central and western portions of the Bering Sea. On Saturday, that system pushes off more to the east, with our stationary boundary behind this system starting to see a lot of the rain stay south of the Aleutian Islands. But as we move out over mainland Alaska, we do have our other low pushing off farther to the east, which is allowing for some areas to get some clearing down in southwest Alaska and some lighter rain farther up north along the west coast. And then some lighter rain throughout much of the mainland portion of the state as well, extending down into the Panhandle area. Taking a look now at our temperatures, low temperatures for Friday morning dropping down into the low to mid 50s for the Panhandle area. And then for South Central area, dropping down into the low to mid 50s for most of those locations as well. Staying a little bit warmer in the Anchorage area up through Talkeetna at 57. Friday afternoon, jumping up to near 60 degrees for most locations around South Central, a little bit warmer there at Glen Allen, getting up to 65. And then down in the Panhandle, getting up in near 60 degrees in the most southern locations, and farther up north by Haines and Skagway, getting up into the mid 60s. Saturday morning lows dropping back down into the 50s throughout the Panhandle, as well as down to near 50 throughout much of South Central Alaska. Looking at those Saturday afternoon highs, getting back up into the 60s around South Central, and then down in the Panhandle area, up right around 60 degrees, still a little bit warmer in the south. Moving up into the interior, far eastern locations of the interior are going to stay warmest as we go to those low temperatures Friday morning, only dropping down to 64 degrees for Fort Yukon, getting gradually cooler as we get farther to the west and the western interior, dropping down into the mid-50s. Into the 40s for most locations along the Arctic coast, but up by Utqiagvik dropping down into the 30s, staying just above freezing up there. Down the west coast dropping down into the 40s expected for Friday morning. Friday afternoon getting back up to near 50 or in the lower 50s for some locations. Right along the water, staying a little bit cooler there in the mid 40s. Along the Arctic coast, 40s are expected. Utqiagvik again staying a little bit cooler, only getting up into the upper 30s. In the interior, once again, colder out west, getting warmer as we move off to the east into the 70s to near 80 for some of the locations out east, and then low 60s for the western portions of the interior. Saturday morning dropping down into the low 50s to near 50 for most locations in the interior, colder through the Brooks Range, and then in the 30s all along the Arctic coast. For the west coast, dropping down into the lower 40s for most locations, again still colder right along the coastline there, 39 expected low for Wales. Saturday afternoon getting back up into the 50s for most locations by the water, staying a little bit cooler there, getting up into the 40s for most locations along the Arctic coast. And then in the interior, temperatures getting up into the upper 50s for the most part, still warmer as we get farther to the east, 63 for Fort Yukon. Dropping down to southwest Alaska, for the most part getting down right around 50 degrees for those lows on Friday morning. Colder as we get closer towards the coast here as well. Then down the Alaska Peninsula, dropping just below 50 degrees, and for the Aleutian Islands, dropping into the 50s. Friday afternoon highs getting up into the 50s here, and then for the Alaska Peninsula, getting up into the upper 50s to near 60 degrees, and in the 50s to near 60s for southwest Alaska as well. Saturday morning lows dropping down into the 40s all throughout southwest to near 50 degrees for the Alaska Peninsula, and then dropping down into the 40s for the Aleutian Islands. Saturday afternoon highs bouncing back up into the 50s for the Aleutians, 53 degrees there at St. Paul, and then getting up into the lower 60s for the Bristol Bay area and into the 50s for the YK Delta. With Alaska weather, I'm David Kramer, and thanks for watching.